Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Curiosity's Chronicles podcast. This is your host, Rohit Kautam. Today, we are doing the live stream, and our guest is Sandeep Jain, who is a strategy consultant and leadership and business coach. Sandeep recently authored a book called Chase the Change. This is why we are here today to discuss this book and discuss his reasoning behind the book and what his learnings are from this book. Before we start the conversation, I would like to thank ICF Global Coach Circle for their continued support. And if you are looking to learn about coaching and you want to learn about professional coaching and how to be a better leader, then do join their programs. Actually, the new program starting soon this month for the ICF Level 1. Also, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, then please click on the subscribe button now and subscribe. Thank you very much, everyone. And without further ado, let's welcome Sandeep. Morning,
Thank you so
Sandeep.
much, Rohit. Thank
Morning.
you. Pleasure
How
to
are
be
you?
here. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining this live stream, Sandeep. So hopefully we'll have a lot of audience waiting to ask their questions as well for your book and title Chase the Change. Before we start, I wanted to ask you, what is your inspiration behind this book, and especially the title Chase the Change?
Yeah. So, to quite an extent, I think the inspiration has been, the let's say to build motivation in people to look at the way they lead their lives and to realize the potentials that I think each of us can realize. I really believe that the heaviest burden that we can carry is the burden of our unrealized potential. And yet, everybody, each of us is guilty of carrying it. The book, to quite an extent, is inspired by my own, journey with change, the leadership coaching work that I do, where I help leaders and individuals work on change. So, in some ways, it's my way of kind of giving back and motivating and inspiring others to think about change.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you share a bit about your journey to writing this book as well, please?
Yeah, so I must say that this book was conceived, written, and put to quite a bit the final extent during the COVID months. It was about 14 months during COVID when I thought that, I've been writing a bit articles and that kind of stuff. And I thought,
Mm,
let me just try and compile my thoughts in the form of a book. Since the book is inspired from my personal journey, I would say, and the work that I do, to quite an extent, I would say the content was not the difficult part. If there was any difficulty, it was the discipline of sitting down to write, I think. And that's something which I think was also in some ways a revelation and a learning. And I talk about even the fact of writing this book in the book itself, and how sometimes a large task you can just slice it, dice it into smaller pieces and do much more than what you would expect otherwise to do.
mm, mm. So if I want to talk about core themes of this book, right? What are those central themes of the book are?
The book basically talks about change, and change in the context of personal growth. On
Mm-hmm.
one hand, it talks about the psychology of change, why we are reluctant to change, what are the irrefutable laws that can help us change. Um, all of us are aware of these things, but somehow we don't live by it. And I think in the second part, the book also puts together, I've put together a framework which is called the Wonder Framework, which can help people with any change that they want to do. How to get started, how to build the motivation, keep going, and how to really win at the change that they want to work in.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, this is about change. Change. I'm quite intrigued, quite curious here. How do you define change, especially in the
Yeah.
context of? I know this is about personal change and the leadership as well, and
Yes.
probably something in the personal development as well.
Yeah. So for me, the definition of change in the context of this book and the topic that I'm dealing with is basically personal, conscious, sustainable change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all three words are important. Personal because it is individual, whether as a leader or as an individual. You are working on yourself more than you're working on others. It's conscious because it's by design. It doesn't happen by default. It's not a stroke of luck. You're really consciously applying yourself towards that change. And lastly, it's sustainable. It's not something which is a flash in the pan. You do it for few days, few months, then let it lay on the side. It is something you work on, and you really get yourself to a position or a situation which is better than where you were. So that's how I look at change in the context. And it could be actually about building a new behavior. It could be about building a new skill, competency. It could even be about building a new hobby, for example. I
Hmm.
think all those are taking us to a better space, let's say. So anything that makes us better as a person or a leader is change in the context of this book.
Right. Okay. So if I have to read this book, get this book, what are the key takeaways do you think readers can gain from this book?
So one of the feedbacks that I've got from people who've read this book is that it certainly helped them kind of, think about change. It's made them pause, look at the way they are living currently. What is it that they want to work on, and how much more they can do with their lives. So, that is certainly one takeaway that everybody will have. It will help them pause and reflect on the way they are leading their lives currently, and what is it that they would like to change. Second, I think is, as I spoke about the Wonder framework, I think it also will help them deal with change in a better way. There is a framework which I have suggested in the book, and I think a lot of people may use that, deploy that to make the change they desire in their work, life, or relationships. So hopefully, a potent dose of inspiration to get started and to stay the course.
Mhm. Because it's quite tough to, I've heard it's quite tough to change, right? It's not.
Yes, it
I
is.
mean, yeah. I mean, most of the time we said is I want to change. Is we are not resisting it. We are just responding to certain things, right? And
Correct.
how do you then, or in the book, or in your experience, how can chase the change help leaders and professionals in their daily lives as well, because it's not always about work, it's about
Yes.
personal life, daily lives, at home, with friends or outside,
Yeah. Yeah. So, the most important thing is that I believe that all of us have two people or two minds in ourselves. One is a thinking mind, the other is a doing mind. For all of us, the thinker is very agile, always making great plans, wanting to do fantastic things, wanting to really go for the sky. But the doer in us is a lazy bugger, actually, not willing to work, I think, and not willing to put that extra effort, which will help you realize the change that you want to work on. And the biggest struggle with most of us is that how do we move the baton from the thinker to the doer? What we've conceptualized for ourselves, for our businesses, for our organizations, how can we make it work? And how can we have that very, very strong bias for action? So that really, I think, is one of the biggest struggles I feel that most of us have when we are dealing with change.
mm. And then this change is, like we discussed, this change very tough, right? And there are a lot
Yeah.
of challenges come in when we have to adapt to change, especially in today's world, right? And if you take leaders, today's world is very VUCA, and we are
Mhm.
discussing this very complex. It's like changing quite rapidly fast. So, what are the biggest challenges then you think, in your experience, leaders face, which actually prompted little bit prompted you to write this book? Because, like you said, they are end of the day, they are humans, they are themselves with their personal things as well. So, what are the biggest challenges they face?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that individuals and leaders they spend more time worrying about things that they can't change rather than working on the things that they can change.
Hmm.
And a lot of times as individuals we are frustrated about the way things are going, but we don't want to take these opportunities or see these challenges as opportunities and work on some of the changes which will help us deal with this change better. So it's important that change, for everybody to know, change doesn't happen by thinking, it happens by doing. You really have to get out of your comfort zone, and you have to, if you are a leader, for example, you have to demonstrate the change in the way you want the organization or the people to change. You have to live that change. You have to build, whether it is within you or within others, you have to build in commitment and not compliance. Commitment is much deeper, it comes from within. And you need to build that inspiration for others and the motivation for yourself, and not really look at being compliant to something, and just because of that trying to change, because then change is not going to happen. If it happens, it's not going to be lasting.
Okay. So if they have to, like, cultivate a mindset of change, right? How can leaders can do that? Because like you said, most of them just do the change. They kind of have a fear, right? So the changes need to be happen, or I need to change, or they need to change, or employees need to change. How they can cultivate a mindset that embraces change rather than fears
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And let's accept change is a way of life. It's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
going to happen by default if you don't make it happen by design. Let's kind of accept that. I think being in a growth mindset, remaining a learner, willingness to get out of your comfort zone, having the resilience and commitment, and again, as I mentioned earlier, most important thing, having a very strong bias for action, for getting started with the change that you want, I think. And if you're dealing with organization, I think it's equally important to take people along. You cannot, in an organization, you can't do everything yourself. You need to kind of cascade that vision, that change strategy to your people, and engage and enable them to be able to help you carry forward the change agenda.
Yeah, that actually prompted me to think, because, like I said, take everyone with you, and in an
Mm,
organization of so many people, not everyone's gonna be with you, right? They probably won't like the change they are trying to implement. Leaders trying to implement, and then what strategies do you recommend for effectively implementing a change within an organization?
the way I look at organizational changes, there are three parts to it. First is creating a climate for change, and that climate is a little bit building a sense of urgency, building a certain coalition who can put the vision and strategy for change together. And typically, that will happen if you are a functional leader or the CEO. It will happen with your immediate team. The other is that how do you enable and engage the larger organization in this change, which means communicating the vision, communicating the why, empowering action, and maybe also creating opportunities for some quick wins, where people are able to see that, yes, this change is leading us somewhere. And then the third aspect is actually implementing and sustaining change. So, leveraging the small wins for the big change that you want, and embedding change in the organizational DNA. So those are the three, to me, whenever I work with organizations on transformation projects, etc., those I really see as three key kind of, segments in this flow of organizational change. And each is equally important, I must say.
Right. Okay. If you can repeat those three, that'll be great,
Yeah,
please, Sandeep. Yeah. What are
yeah.
the three?
So one is creating the climate for change, let's say.
Climate for change. Yeah.
Second is enabling and engaging the larger organization. And the third is implementing and sustaining change.
Yeah, because the first one, I'm creating the climate, right? Creating the environment for the change. I think this is very important.
Absolutely.
This is a great bit you just mentioned. This is very important, because what I've noticed, some leaders start doing the change, implementing the change without even creating the environment. Because I remember listening to Dave Snowden. He said you can't change. You can't. I think I don't remember the correct wording, but he said if you have to change, you can't. You have to nudge the system. You can't nudge the
Mm,
system unless you change the environment to be nudged, right? So you have to change the environment for the environment to be nudged. You can't just nudge it
yes.
straight away, right? You have to. It's very, very important to create the environment. So thanks for sharing that. That's for reminding us again. But yeah, so you mentioned you worked with a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations as well in transformation, right? Can you share an example of a leader or organization that successfully embraced change in your experience in your professional career?
See, if you look at global examples, there have been many, honestly.
Mm,
For example, you look at Satya Nadella. 2014, he joined Microsoft. It was in a position where, their shares were declining. It seemed that it would be probably long gone. But the way he dealt with those challenges, and the transformation on both aspects, the cultural aspect and also the technology aspect, the cloud computing, the AI, the digesting of the acquisitions that they had made, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, etc. And how from a window centric it's become more a platform agnostic kind of platform now. So so that's been one example which comes to my mind. I think Elon Musk is another one. How you can create businesses from nowhere with a very, very strong sense of why you want to do that. Um, if you take Indian context, I think obviously, I still have a lot of respect for Ratan Tata. The way he kind of changed the course for Tatas, I would say, and people who came after him, they were able to kind of maintain that momentum a little bit. And so, yeah, I think all these people have been there, done that. In the work that I do, I have seen very charismatic leaders, without kind of going into really the details of the companies and names, who really led this from the front. And one of the things which happens, especially in organizational change and transformation journeys, is that sometimes the top management gets completely disconnected with the management down the line. I think the leaders who've been able to make this change, and we spoke about this in the previous discussion also, previous point, but leaders who are able to stay connected to the ground, or somehow involve people who are at the execution level also in the story of change, I think tend to deliver more on some of these changes that they are actually able to make in the organization.
mm. I think it's because, like you said earlier as well, it's anything is personal, right? Everything is
Yes.
self. Everything starts from self. So, in your view, I don't know if you probably mentioned in the book as well. I haven't read it, but I'm getting my book, so apologies for that.
Okay.
So,
No worries.
how important is personal development in the process of chasing them and embracing change?
Uh, Personal development is really, for me, change and personal development are not two different things. If you
Mm,
can't change yourself, you can't inspire others to change. You can't change an organization. So for me, change or personal development has to be part of your agenda, and I think most of the leaders show that humility, show the willingness to learn, and listen, and stay curious and exploratory in whatever they end up doing. So personal development, I think, is really very, very, very critical as far as the change is concerned. And we spoke about, really, as I mentioned, positive, conscious, sustainable change. That's really personal development. And this could be anything. It could be about physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social. It could be anything. As long as you're working to become better at one of these areas, I think you're conscious of the needs for you to become a better person.
mm, mm. I want to pick up something you just mentioned at the start of this. You said you can inspire others to change, right? This is very, very important personally for me because I've been in this change, like agile change, agile transformations as well, because you can't change anyone. You can only inspire them, right? If you think you can change anyone, that's very unethical,
Yes.
because people change for themselves, right? They don't change for anyone else. And then it's up to them when they want to change. Up to them, if they feel the value of this, then they change, right? So this is why it's very important. You mentioned you can only inspire others, you can't change them. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And Rohit, both of us are coaches in our
mm,
own right, and we
yeah,
all understand that's the value a coach brings to any engagement or any
mm,
client,
mm,
is just to make them think about change, build that motivation, consciousness, but you can't really make them, you cannot you cannot own, for example, the
Yes.
success of a coaching
Yeah. Yeah.
engagement
Yeah.
that you made the client change. I
Exactly.
think there
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
certain degree of willingness to work,
Mm,
and
mm.
you just supported them in that journey.
Exactly, exactly. This is why sometimes it's hard to provide. When stakeholders say, "What value do you provide?" It's very hard to say what value do you provide.
Absolutely.
you know, yeah. So I want to come into more practices side now because we discussed about the why and what. So how what practices do you suggest for individuals looking to stay ahead in their personal or professional lives?
um, for me, the most important, I would think, is a curious and an exploratory mindset. Willingness to explore things that they haven't done before. I think, willingness to get out of their comfort zone. Obviously, that leads to the second point, which is a little bit being adaptable, because
Mm,
that getting out of the comfort zone is not going to be easy. It's going to be a space where you've not been before, and that's why it's not your comfort zone. So, how do you remain adaptable? How do you take it as an opportunity to build your resilience? And then, as I mentioned, not only thinking about change, but willingness to do something about it. The bias for action to me is the most critical thing, and sometimes we become a little bit, when we are dealing with personal change, in spite of putting all the effort, sometimes, 6 months, 1 year down the line, we say, yeah, probably, I still, when I compare myself with so and so person, they are so much better at this. So we are, a little bit looking at the glass as half
mm.
full or half empty.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to look at is the fact that the capacity of the glass has increased.
Mm,
That half full now is still a lot fuller than what it was when you started with it.
true.
And
Very true.
change is also muscle. You work on one change, you get excited to work on another one.
Mm,
You know.
yeah. Yeah. True. So I'm gonna ask you your personal thing now. So obviously you wrote the book from your own experiences. Can you share a personal story about embracing a change in
Yeah,
you? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of things in my life have been a bit more about. So one is obviously career. I am by qualification a finance professional. So
Mm,
my second career was in business roles where I stepped into CEO kind of roles, and that needed a completely different mindset. I think my third shift happened when I got into coaching and consulting work. I do transformation, strategy consulting, and on the coaching side, I do leadership coaching. And I have reskilled, retooled myself to acquire the qualifications and the mindsets to be a coach. So I think that's one. Second, a lot of my changes have been driven from on the physical side of things. I've been one of those who never ever played a sport in my school, college, any, for that matter, growing up years. I took to running when I turned, I think, 45, close to that. And I've now in a zone where I at least have the capacity to run full marathons. I do
nice.
that.
Nice.
I think that's one. 2 months back, I took a Everest base camp trek, being on the
Wow.
wrong side of 50s, 12 days in the mountains trekking.
Wow.
I
Wow.
think so, those, and again, I think a lot of it comes from just the willingness to try
Mm,
something new.
yeah. Yeah. True. True. And I really like you mentioned coming out of your comfort zone, right? It just
Yeah,
stay. The first step is the hardest step, right? You have to think, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So I just want to share mine as well because, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
like you mentioned marathon here because I am planning to run a marathon next year, probably half a
Oh,
marathon. I don't
wow.
want to go
Nice.
marathon, probably half marathon. I'm gonna go step by step, right? Because so yeah, so I'm coming out of my comfort zone. I've got my shoes now. I've got my done my gait analysis.
Fantastic.
So hopefully I can run a half marathon next year, and then marathon a year after. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
So,
is. It is.
running brings me, since you are also in that zone
Mm,
now, I remember at some point in time, I'd also taken a coach because I thought
mm.
the coach will help it. And certainly it helped. It always
Yeah,
helps, really.
yeah, yeah.
And, one of the things that we discussed, and he told me the first half, I think I was about to run. So I
Mm.
said, I'm not so sure I'm even going to attempt it. So he
Right.
told me one thing. He said, let me tell you, DNR is always, DNF is always better than DNR. And in running lingo, DNF is did not finish and DNR is did not
Did
run.
not run.
So he
True.
says, I'll be happy if you come back after 10, 12 kilometers rather than saying, I don't want to run. At least you will know what it takes to participate, and honestly, some of these things you realize that, there is so much energy the space gives you. The people around you, everybody is running, everybody is kind of, in that mood.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one of the ways to deal with change you spoke about is that how can we have more people in that community, whether it's public speaking, whether it is running, whether it is trekking. How can you have a group of friends with you or build a community where you can deal with this change?
Yeah. Yeah. It does matter actually. It does.
Absolutely.
Even in organization transformations, more people are focused on that. More people are with there, and they can build a community and start doing those changes, or doing that, and then people will follow. Basically they inspire others to
Yeah,
follow.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And in organizations, it's very common, Rohit, and I'm sure you would have also seen this, that, whenever an organization is going through a transformation or a change journey, besides the top leadership, etc., you will have what are called change champions or change makers. These are the people who are early adopters as far as
Early
this change is
adopters. Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are willing to kind of give it all they have, and they believe that it is needed. And those are the people who end up inspiring others more than probably the leaders can, because they are part
Exactly.
of that community.
Exactly. 100%. Totally agree with it. Totally agree with it. And then this is why we say, right, everyone is a leader in the organization, because everyone inspire everyone else. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the more opportunity we give them, the
Yeah.
better it is for the
Better it
organization.
is. Exactly. So obviously any change, everything comes from with some challenges, right? What was the most challenging change you have had to chase? If I have to say, call that chase the change, and how did you overcome it?
Uh, for me, I have attempted things I have not necessarily got good at. For example, I've attempted dancing and I never got better at it. So anything which you try over a long period of time and it doesn't happen, sometimes becomes, you start looking at it as a bit of a challenge. I attempted to play a musical instrument. I wanted to learn guitar. I bought a guitar. I failed at that change, I must say. Um, so it was for sure challenging because I couldn't build the motivation to do it. Or sometimes what also happens is things from outside seem so simple. Yeah, it's so easy to pick up a guitar and play, but then you realize, no, it's not that simple. However, having said that, I still believe that that was worth it because, I know a little bit more about that instrument now. How, I know, how strumming and chords are different, what chords are where, what notes are played where. I can certainly appreciate people playing better than what I could earlier. So yeah, so some of those things have been, I would say, challenging. You know, it's also been challenging to kind of. I had a little bit of a condition as a runner when I had a bit of a L4, L5 lumbar problem.
Okay.
And then sometimes how to hold yourself back and give yourself the opportunity, because sometimes we also don't so much prioritize self care. We
True.
believe we can get
Yeah.
with it,
Too
get
early.
on
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think, and that's a big challenge for somebody who's active. For example, I was used to running already, and for me not to do anything for 3 months and allow myself to recover was a absolutely challenging thing to do. For me, that was really getting out of the comfort zone. At that point in
True.
time.
True. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And I'm linking this back to what you just said, DNF and DNR, right? For guitar,
Yeah.
you at least you did. It's fine you did
Yeah.
not finish, but at least
Yeah.
you run it, right? Yeah. And then this live streaming as well, right? I've only done one live stream before. This is a second live stream, and this is me coming out of my comfort zone because And normal recording, I can edit what I want to edit, but here it's all live, right? So this is again kind of, I'm trying to
So Rohit,
do a
let
little
me
bit.
own
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
This is the first one for me.
There you go. So we both got
And when you kind of called me up to say that
yeah.
do you want to come on live stream,
Yeah.
I thought for a moment and I said, if not now, then when?
That went
Let's do
exactly.
it.
There you go. There you go. That's a perfect example, right? What else could
Yeah,
happen, right?
yeah.
We need to celebrate these. Even it's a failure, we need to celebrate those big failures, right?
And we've learned, right,
We are
Rohit?
learned
Before the
exactly.
call, we were
Yeah.
connecting, and you were
Yeah.
telling me how the lighting is not proper,
Yeah.
and this and
Yeah.
that. And I understand that some of these things are important, and probably next time I'll
Mm.
be more conscious.
Yeah.
But if I had
Brilliant.
not done this,
Yeah.
I would have not realized that.
Exactly. Exactly. No. No. Brilliant. Brilliant. See, there you go.
Yeah,
So change the change, guys. Change the change.
yeah.
Yeah. And if you haven't subscribed to Podcast Test, please press the subscribe button. And if you have any questions, if you're online on YouTube, please put your comments, any questions in the comments so I can ask Sandeep. So moving on, Sandeep, probably we are nearly at the end as well. So what advice would you give to aspiring leaders who are hesitant about change?
Uh, I think for me, the most important is going to be that don't keep thinking about change. Drive the change that you want, lead it from the front. Don't just keep talking about we need to do these things. Help people understand how they can be done. Form the kind of team that you think has the right kind of combination of people who can go there and execute and who also have that strategic mindset to be able to give the change the right direction that it deserves. If you think that you need help from outside, I think go ahead and get going with it. You can't wait for eternity for that change, because actually, the more we wait, whether it's for individual change or organizational change, more reasons arise why we don't change.
Hmm.
Because environment becomes even more negative. For example, your personal motivation just sinks. Changes in the team happen if it's an organization. So I think somehow to be able to set that ball rolling, and the other is if we are talking of leaders and organizations, to me, and this is my experience, I think it's important to have a crack team in place, a project team who will drive the change. Because there is limited stuff you can expect your people to do on the go with double hatting with their jobs and stuff. So while you will certainly draw on their knowledge, wisdom, experience, but you need to have some kind of a project team who's going to hold your change agenda together.
Hmm.
So those are some of the things that I think I would certainly The other is about change, and I think again this is about personal change, organizational change. How can you, in the personal change space, how can you start small? Because initially it's about building habits, building the discipline of doing. So how can you start small rather than becoming overwhelmed with change? And in the organizational context, I say that how can you test that change at a low risk level? For example, how can you run pilots, how can you run prototypes, so that you're not at the receiving end of a misstep in the change process, and that misstep happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It does. So again, with the misstep, and if we link celebrate failure as well. So any story you could share where you think, okay, that wasn't what how it I intended to be, and what did you learn from it? Any story you can tell?
Mm, so in the personal space, I shared some of the stories
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
about trying to play
Yeah.
a guitar,
Yeah.
etc.,
Yeah.
etc. In the organizational space, mm, so there have been changes. For example, I've had worked with an organization on, they wanted to, and this was an organization outside India. They had already done their transformation roadmap, and they had about 9 projects that they wanted to uh, kind of implement around the strategic interventions they wanted to make in their business. At the end of our 8-month engagement, we were done only with 4 of them, and we were about 30% done for 3 of them. and we had already decided that two of them will probably not happen because they were bigger hurdles than we thought when we started. Now, you can look at this project as some kind of certainly not a huge success. We would not call that, because out of the 9 initiatives, only four got done, let's say. But the fact remains that if I look back into the history of that organization, they were trying to make these changes for 4 years,
Hmm.
and they had not been able to move on it at all. Now here they at least started work on it, and this was all done with, I provided the project governance, they had their internal teams, and we worked together to do it. But at least in those 6 8 months we were able to achieve, let's say, about 25, 30, 40% of what they had expected to achieve. So so that's one example. I would say, I don't talk about it as a success, but I certainly think it wasn't a failure. So there are opportunities even in those failures. That's what I mean.
Hmm.
And it's amazing. People who work in the innovation space will realize that a lot of times you are working towards another solution, another product, but eventually on the side you will discover something which you had not initially started with.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Anything can emerge, right? It's an
Yes,
emerging world we
exactly.
live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in complexity, and is everything is emerging as we go along. So
So
and
as
then
they say, 100% of the goals that you're going to miss are the ones which you don't take shots
we
at.
don't know take shots. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. True.
Uh,
True. Yeah. And then how do you see the role of leadership evolving in the next decade, especially with a lot of changes happening. AI is coming in. I don't know what future is bringing to us.
yes, absolutely. None
You
of us
know,
know, I think.
yeah, none
Yeah.
of us know, and the lot of global shifts as well. So, what do you think the role of
Yeah.
leadership evolving then?
I think it's going to be so much more about the why
Mm,
and possibly the how than the what, because I think a lot of the what technology will help you answer. Let's say, I think it's going to be, why do you want to do a certain thing? So
mm,
how do you inspire people? How do you forge connections? How can you remain creative and innovative in your own space and as organizations? That probably is going to be more valuable. Human connections, creativity, emotional intelligence. I think those are some of the things which are going to be difficult, or at least are going to be the last frontiers which technology will master.
yeah, yeah. So, for that, what skills do you believe will be most crucial for future leaders?
I think just building that mindset to remain innovative, to remain experimental and exploratory. Just to give yourself the opportunity to put yourself in more and more situations where you can learn from what's happening around you, and you can digest how that is going to impact you, both favorably and unfavorably, let's say. The willingness to listen to people. Sometimes we as leaders become so full of ourselves that we just lose the ability to listen. And how to be able to, we coaches understand this. How can you be more in a questioning kind of a mindset, powerful questions rather than directional, where you can plant your own ideas in your team members and see them grow, rather than saying, "Okay, ab ye karna and you have to do this and you have to do that." Not really that. And as we talk about in organizational context, how do you build the psychological safety that you would need in your organizations? Um, those are some of the things that leaders will need to work on. And it's both. I think it's both a competency they need to but also it's a little bit the outcome as well. That you want to drive in your organization, because you don't want to build it only for yourself. You want to build it for across the organization. You need to embed this in the culture of the or the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, true. True. So, thank you, Sandeep. We are at the end of our live stream today. Thanks for your time. But
Thank
before
you.
you go, I want to ask, what are your future goals now? You written the book. What next?
Actually, I have been struggling with that question, honestly. What next? Where do I challenge myself next? So, yeah, there are a couple of agenda items. One of them is this book's been a little bit about personal change to write something around organizational change.
Great. Yeah.
That is again something, the work that I do with transformation work, strategy consulting. So how can organizations become better at driving change? What, as you were asking, what can leaders do differently? So possibly, I think ideation and then getting down to writing the second book. I think that's certainly going to be something. And I have really taken to trekking. I've really enjoyed my first, trip to the Everest base camp. So
Nice.
hopefully, many more base camps to come. So that is certainly something which I want to build the stamina and strength for. Um, yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that's really what it is.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now I'm looking forward to that book as well, and then hopefully we can do another podcast on that, right? We can,
Absolutely,
we can,
you.
we can go deeper into organizational change.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, no, thank you very much for coming into this space and sharing your thoughts, your experience with us and the audience. There is no questions yet, but guys, if you have any questions, please put in. I can ask him offline, and then he can always come back to us. Before we go, I would like to thank Sandeep for coming into this space, and please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't so. Take care, stay safe. Bye for now. Bye, Sandeep.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It's been a pleasure. All the best to the audiences. May they all be the individuals they desire to be or the leaders they desire to be. Let them get started on the change journeys that they want to create for themselves. And it's been a great opportunity chatting with you. Hope to be back some other time on another topic.
Brilliant.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
doing better with the background lighting and stuff.
No, no, we need, we are learning every time, right?
Absolutely.
No worries. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.